Imagine a single boy from a tiny New England village whose courage changed the fate of an entire nation. Nobody remembers his name, yet without him, history itself might have turned differently. This is the story of Samuel Hayes, the untold hero of the American Revolution. 1776 was a year that shook the 13 American colonies. The air was heavy with whispers of rebellion, secret meetings, and urgent plans. In a small, sleepy village in New England, a young farm boy named Samuel Hayes lived a quiet life, tending crops and caring for his family's livestock. Yet beneath his ordinary appearance burned a determination that could not be contained. Samuel had grown up hearing stories of tyranny and freedom, and he understood that liberty was not given, it had to be fought for. Even as Samuel worked in the fields under the morning sun, his mind was elsewhere. He studied maps, memorized troop movements, and listened carefully to every traveler who passed through his village. Tales of brave men joining the Continental Army filled him with hope and resolve. Samuel was not a soldier, but he knew that sometimes courage was more valuable than training or rank. He had made up his mind. If freedom was to come to his people, he would play his part. The turning point arrived one fateful evening when a messenger came to the village with urgent news. British troops were advancing, moving closer to towns and villages that had pledged support to the revolutionary cause. Panic swept through the village. Families hurried to secure their homes, neighbors whispered in fear, and a sense of dread settled over the streets. Samuel, however, felt no fear. Instead, he felt a surge of purpose. Hiding would not help anyone. If he could deliver the intelligence he had gathered, he might give the Patriots a chance to prepare and perhaps even turn the tide of the approaching battle. Under the cover of night, Samuel set off through the dense forest, the moonlight barely illuminating the narrow path. Every snapping twig threatened to betray him, and the distant sound of patrolling soldiers made his heart race. His mind focused entirely on the mission ahead. Hours seemed like days as he moved silently, pressed against shadows, calculating each step with care. Finally, he arrived at the encampment of local patriots. The soldiers, weary and tense, hardly expected anyone to arrive under the cover of darkness, let alone a young boy with vital intelligence. Samuel handed over a carefully memorized map and notes detailing British troop movements. The officer's eyes widened in disbelief. "You risked your life for this?" one asked. Samuel's voice was steady as he replied, "Every warning counts. Freedom is worth every risk." From that night onward, Samuel undertook several dangerous missions, slipping through enemy lines to deliver information that could save lives and alter the course of battles. Each trip was perilous. A single misstep could have led to his capture or death. Yet Samuel moved with precision, blending into the shadows, becoming invisible to those who would stop him. With each successful mission, he gained confidence. But more importantly, he inspired hope in those around him. Even men and women too fearful to take up arms found courage through his actions. Then came the mission that would define him. Samuel learned of a British supply camp filled with ammunition and critical resources. Without this supply, the Patriots would face a severe disadvantage in the upcoming engagement. The camp was heavily guarded, and the path to it was fraught with danger. Samuel knew he had no choice but to act. Creeping along the forest edge, he studied the guards' movements. He counted their steps, memorized their routines, and planned each motion with care. His heart pounded, but he pressed on. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, yet the thought of his people's freedom urged him forward. He reached the supply tent and, with trembling hands, quickly located the maps and inventory lists. Then, a soldier's voice cut through the night, sharp and commanding. Samuel ducked behind a stack of crates, holding his breath as the soldier passed. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, and yet he remained calm, knowing that the mission must succeed. By dawn, Samuel had returned to the Patriot camp. He delivered the maps and critical information, exhausted but triumphant. The officers quickly realized the importance of what he had done. With this intelligence, they could plan ambushes, fortify positions, and prepare for the battle that lay ahead. Samuel, though tired and worn, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had not sought fame or recognition, only the chance to help his people, to protect them, and to secure their liberty. As the first light of morning bathed the village in a golden glow, Samuel stood silently, reflecting on the risks he had taken. The villagers remained unaware of the hero in their midst, yet his courage had already begun to shape history. Samuel knew that generals and famous leaders would be remembered in books, but he also understood that history was written not just by those in command, but by ordinary men who dared to act when it mattered most. The village stirred with anticipation of the coming conflict. Samuel, though exhausted, prepared himself for the trials that lay ahead. His resolve was unshakable. "Freedom is worth every risk," he whispered to himself, eyes fixed on the horizon. The revolution would soon test every patriot's courage, and Samuel Hayes was ready. Little did anyone know that the actions of this humble farm boy would quietly shape the outcome of history, leaving a legacy unseen but unforgettable.
The dawn broke with a fiery glow over the rolling hills of New England. The village Samuel Hayes had called home now lay on the edge of a storm, the storm of revolution. Word of the British retreating from certain positions reached the Patriots, and the officers quickly gathered to strategize. Thanks to Samuel's intelligence, they could anticipate the enemy's maneuvers, fortify weak points, and plan decisive strikes. Yet few among them knew the boy who had risked everything to make this advantage possible. Samuel, standing at the edge of the camp, watched the soldiers prepare for the coming battle. The men and women were nervous, hands shaking as they loaded muskets and adjusted cannons. Despite the chaos, there was a spark of hope in their eyes, a hope that had been planted in the dead of night by a farm boy who moved silently among the shadows. Samuel took a deep breath, steadying himself for the task that lay ahead. He knew the stakes. Victory was not guaranteed, but the courage of those willing to fight for freedom could tip the scales. As the first shots rang out, smoke and dust clouded the valley. The sound of cannon fire and musket volleys echoed through the hills. Samuel moved alongside the Patriots, guiding small groups toward strategic positions that he had memorized from the maps he had delivered. Every order he whispered, every direction he gave, was based on knowledge that no general had yet possessed. The British forces, confident in their strength, were bewildered by the unexpected precision of the Patriot attacks. Ambushes appeared where none had been anticipated, and defensive positions seemed eerily well prepared. Samuel's unseen hand was shaping the battle. Hours passed like an eternity. The clash of soldiers and the roar of artillery created a relentless symphony of chaos. Yet amidst the noise, Samuel remained calm and focused. He moved tirelessly, ensuring that each unit knew their place, that every vulnerable flank was guarded, and that the Patriots could advance with confidence. At one point, a fellow soldier turned to him in disbelief, whispering, "How do they anticipate our every move?" Samuel smiled faintly, though no one knew the true answer. His courage, observation, and careful planning had orchestrated this advantage. By midday, the tide of the battle began to turn. The British forces, frustrated and disoriented, faltered in their advance. Soldiers who had once charged with arrogance now retreated under the unexpected resistance. Samuel's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a mix of relief and determination. Every victory, however small, was a step toward freedom. Each act of bravery by the Patriots, inspired or guided by him, reinforced the idea that ordinary people could change history. As the sun climbed higher, the battle neared its climax. Samuel observed from a low ridge, scanning the battlefield. Smoke hung thick in the air, punctuated by flashes of musket fire. He noticed a small group of Patriots trapped behind enemy lines. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward them, weaving through chaos, guiding them to safety with precise instructions shouted over the din. The soldiers followed him, trusting the boy whose name they barely knew, relying on his courage and instinct. The afternoon brought a decisive moment. The Patriots, using the intelligence Samuel had delivered, executed a maneuver that forced the British into retreat. Cannons fired from positions Samuel had indicated, muskets rained from hidden flanks, and the enemy's lines broke under the coordinated attack. Cheers erupted among the Patriots, but Samuel remained in the background, silent and watchful. He did not seek recognition. His satisfaction lay in knowing that freedom had been defended and that his small actions had contributed to a larger victory. As the smoke of battle cleared, Samuel walked among the fallen, both friend and foe, and offered silent prayers for their souls. Victory had been won, but at great cost. He reflected on the courage of countless men and women who, like him, had risked life and limb for the dream of liberty. He realized that history often remembered generals and famous leaders, yet the contributions of ordinary heroes, those who acted without fame or acclaim, were equally vital. Returning to his village later that evening, Samuel was met with relief and gratitude. Villagers and patriots alike came to him, praising his bravery, though few understood the full extent of his deeds. He smiled modestly, letting others believe his actions were simply part of the larger war effort. True heroism, he knew, did not require recognition. Its value lay in the impact it created, in the lives saved, and in the freedom that was preserved. Samuel stood at the edge of the village, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The American colonies were far from free, but the spirit of rebellion had been strengthened, and every step forward was thanks to countless acts of courage, visible or unseen. He thought of the generations yet to come and the stories they would tell of heroes who shaped the nation. Even if his name remained unknown, he took comfort in knowing that freedom had 1,000 invisible champions, each playing a part. As the night settled over New England, Samuel Hayes finally allowed himself a moment of quiet. He reflected on the battles fought, the risks taken, and the sacrifices made, not for glory, but for something far greater than himself. His story, largely untold, was a testament to the power of determination, courage, and hope. History, he realized, was not just written by generals and presidents. It was written by those who dared to rise when the world demanded it most. And so, the untold hero, the farm boy from a quiet village, left a legacy of courage and inspiration that would ripple silently through the pages of history. Samuel Hayes would never be famous, yet his bravery had ensured that the dream of liberty endured. The revolution was not won by a single act, but by the quiet, persistent courage of ordinary people. People like him, whose names might be forgotten, but whose impact would last forever.